The more you know you don't know. Those words by Aristotle express the great quest for wisdom we human beings had since the beginning of time. For the truth is, the more we know, the more we realize how much more there still needs to be known. And that's why I'm creating this podcast. I'm Barry Kibrick, and welcome to Thoughts Through Time, a podcast dedicated to exploring all the great thinkers in every field and from all parts of the globe. The reason? So we can see clearer today, improve ourselves, our relationships, and if we keep our fingers crossed, maybe our society as well. And what better way to start than with the words of Aristotle, who was one of the first to feed our unquenchable hunger for knowledge. Aristotle, he's considered among the greatest philosophers of all time. He was born in 384 BC, and he was a student of Plato's for a bit over 20 years. Now, at Plato's Lyceum, he developed many theories that built upon Plato's themselves. Plato, he thought the ultimate reality is only knowable through reason and reflection, which for the most part are ideas. Now, Aristotle, he believed the same thing to some extent. He thought also that the highest quality was the contemplation of ideas and thoughts. But here's where they separated paths. Aristotle believed that the ultimate reality is knowable through experience. You can't argue with that. His writings, they span a wide range of disciplines. They go from logic and philosophy all the way through ethics, political theory. He discussed aesthetics, biology, the cosmos, rhetoric. I'm telling you, you name it, you can think of it. He thought of it, he talked about it, and he wrote about it. So today, I got to pick one of the things to focus on, and I'm going to choose Aristotle's theories about why humans behave the way we do and the qualities we must possess to get us through those toughest of times we're inevitably going to face. Because you see, Aristotle cared so much about the importance of developing ideal character traits within the person, he actually is called the inspiration behind virtue ethics. A fancy term, so let's get into it a little bit. Virtue ethics is the quest to understand and live a life of moral character. Moral character, according to Aristotle, is developed by practicing such traits as honesty, justice, bravery, generosity, courage, the kind of stuff we all know, the stuff that is honorable character traits of a good person. Being of good character and following ethical behavior is tough enough, in my opinion. But doing so in hard times, that's something Aristotle thought was vital to truly developing one's better self. Now, the ability to face adversity in all its forms is really a key attribute we must strive for. Because, come on, the struggle is to live. That's what life is about. It's all about struggle. But how we deal with our struggles, that's going to define our character. There's no doubt. Aristotle dedicated himself to probing the human condition because he knew the character traits we develop will allow us to perform at our highest quality, even under any circumstance. It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. Those words by the ancient master is essential, because without that ability, life wears us down, and it does so psychologically and physically. But how we respond to our own dark nights of the soul, that's what's going to determine if we keep spiraling downward or emerge from the depths even brighter than before. And now, through the latest in brain imaging, believe it or not, we can actually see these are not only mental and emotional changes that occur, but they're substantial changes in our chemical and structural makeup as well. Aristotle, he did have a sense of this, although he did not have a CAT scan or MRI at his side. But he created a way for us to discern the best actions we can attain at any given time. The method that he used is known as the dialectic. And in short, what that is, it's a way to find balance and truth during any condition and in any occasion. See, the dialectic is a process, and what it does is it approaches issues from multiple perspectives to reach a reasonable conclusion, even if the sources themselves are contradictory. Basically, in short, it is the ultimate form of moderation and compromise, even if it's derived from extreme views. So here's how Aristotle actually described it. The dialectic as a whole, or of one of its parts, is to consider every kind of syllogism in a similar manner. It is clear that he who is most capable of examining the matter and forms of a syllogism will be, in the highest degree, a master. So what is syllogism? I had to look it up myself. It's a form of deductive reasoning. It's when you take all things that are pertinent, you examine them, you really look deep into all their possibilities, and then you draw out from it a conclusion that best suits the situation. Aristotle actually lectured on it. He used these words: the power of discerning and holding in one view the results of either of two hypotheses is to make a right choice. Basically, it was and remains a way for us to find evidence when we are in doubt. Think about it. Think about it like this. If you have two opposing views, you could either be convinced that one is right, or we could reach a compromise or middle ground. Now, this holds true not only for issues we deal with on the outside, but when debating within our own head what is right for us to do, it might be a good idea to use this dialectic methodology. And Aristotle said that when we do, we're going to end up what he called the golden mean. Here's what he wrote about that. The golden mean is a state apt to exercise deliberate choice, being in the relative mean. In other words, the golden mean focuses on the middle ground between two extremes. The issue for Aristotle was not really to solve every problem, but to develop ways to think about them. That's why we are able to take ancient wisdom and apply it to our own life in the present. For Aristotle, the key aspect, though, was the study of ethics. Ethics are specific rules that guide our behavior. And how we apply them to ourselves, it allows us to have a better command of our actions. In his treatise on ethics, titled Nicomachean Ethics, which, by the way, was named after his son Nicomachus, because his son helped him combine his lectures and his writings into this main thesis on human behavior. How we look at ethics and virtue today, believe it or not, is still based on Aristotle's vision of always seeking out what is good. And for us to be as good as we can be, even with all our human frailties and foibles, all our mistakes, no matter what, as long as we are seeking out what is good, which he says is literally our instincts, we're going to be on the right path. And he states this in the first paragraph of his treatise on ethics. He says that every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good. And for this reason, the good has rightly been declared to be that which all things aim. It's kind of a nice thought, isn't it? You see, Aristotle believed it is in our instinct, it's in our nature to do good in anything and everything we attempt. Now, it doesn't always seem that way, I know. I mean, during our current times, many of us right now, we're questioning the actions of our fellow humans, and many of our institutions as well, as they are portrayed right now to be acting on two sides of extreme and neither aiming for what is rightfully good. However, and I really believe this, the reality I know is different. You see, I'm positive that the majority of us do aim for the good. The problem is we are constantly bombarded by all forms of information only by the extremes. But you see, Aristotle knew this could become the case, and he wrote that moral behavior is the mean between two extremes. At one end is excess, at the other, deficiency. Find a moderate position between those two extremes, and you will be acting morally. So how do we change this perception? Aristotle had some thoughts on it. He lectured that for man who is truly good and wise, we think, bears all the chances of life becomingly and always will make the best of circumstances. Now, like then, we will make the best out of the circumstances. We do, because when we do, it gives us more strength, it gives us wisdom, gives us stamina to persevere and to deal with events as they occur. Plus, we do so no matter how hard it is or how bleak it looks. We have to. We have no option. The reason? It is the essence of our humanity. You see, throughout the darkest days of history, humanity has always emerged better than before, and that's regardless of the agony or misery we experienced. Think about it. Out of the Dark Ages comes the Renaissance. I mean, that's just the way it goes through history. Out of the worst experience in World War II comes out the greatest successes of humanity. In fact, Aristotle was so adamant about this that he even saw the splendor in the struggle, and we need to as well. He wrote these words: "Suffering becomes beautiful when anyone bears great calamities with cheerfulness, not through insensibility, but through greatness of mind." This I have no doubt. It is the best way for us to deal with absolutely anything life throws at us. It could be an illness, it could be bad news, a loss, a major change, even a worldwide pandemic. But to face each crisis and deal with it, yes, even cheerfully, that is a testament to our character. And remember Aristotle's words. This is not due to insensibility or naivete. It's not because we're not knowledgeable. It's because of the greatness of our mind. This message cannot be overstated. You see, the reason is because no Not a soul is going to ever escape from hardship. But we do have a choice, and that choice is in how we're going to deal with it. And when we choose correctly, it can even soothe our spirits and lift us to new heights of awareness. And Aristotle was also aware that we are always a work in progress. And in order for us to develop our character, he wrote these words: "We learn moral virtue primarily through habit and practice." Once again, going back to what separated Aristotle from Plato and Socrates was he was a man of action, no matter how much he loved contemplation. I mean, many things can be taught, but without action, they rarely will come to fruition. And even a great thinker like Aristotle, who cherished thought and contemplation, calling it the highest human activity, wrote that we have to act in order to learn even before contemplating it. And he emphasizes it with these words: for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. I mean, it reminds me of that old expression, jump first and learn how to build the parachute on the way down. But sometimes that's the way we have to do things. For Aristotle, action is the key, and sometimes we just have to act and then learn from that action. Or, most likely, what will happen, at least this is my experience, we're going to be learning from the mistakes that inevitably will happen. But remember this: if Aristotle is right, and I believe he is, the action aims towards the good. So even when the action is under duress or we make errors, we will benefit more than not taking the action. And yes, the results will often mean making mistakes. However, the reality is the more mistakes, the merrier, for mistakes are our guides. They lead us to the path of attaining the traits and qualities we require to improve our own performance. Aristotle let us know this, that it can even bring out great dignity in our character. And he emphasized that concept with these words: even in adversity, nobility shines through when a man endures repeated and severe misfortune with patience and greatness of soul. Now, how we achieve this most important attribute is that whether we are born with it or taught it, it requires diligence and work to develop and maintain the qualities of good behavior and ethical values. But there is a caution, and I really want to emphasize it, because especially for those of us who do aim for the good, many of us have a tendency to become extra hard on ourselves if we do not live up to our expectations of what we want our behavior to be. Remember, not living up to expectations is what causes unhappiness. It's simply that. This puts us in great jeopardy, because feeling that we failed in our expectations, if it is the primary cause of unhappiness and depression, we're in for a lot of trouble. Yet happiness is the primary goal of Aristotle's desire for us. And the way to achieve it is to behave ethically, and states it clearly with these words: the highest good and the end toward which all human activity is directed is towards happiness. And don't forget, this isn't the happiness of a good large scoop of ice cream. This is the happiness of knowing you're doing the best that you can be doing. So, Are we stuck between a rock and a hard place if we fail to live up to the virtues that directly lead to happiness? The answer is absolutely not. In fact, Aristotle actually leads us towards a path of balancing this within our lives. And he gives us this information. We might refine our emotions by cleansing them of their more unhealthy elements, rather than ridding ourselves of the emotions by purging them altogether. I cannot emphasize how important this concept is when we view ourselves, and especially when we listen to the chatter in our mind, and it prevents us from reaching our highest potential. In a sense, it begins with us having a dialectical conversation with ourselves. We first look at the unhealthy way we may view ourselves, and rather than attempt to purge those emotions or get rid of them, we just make the slight adjustments and refine them. Because guess what? We're never going to be able to get rid of them. But we can make the adjustments, we can refine them, and we can be able to appreciate them even. This, however, does reside within ourselves. There can be no guidebook on how to deal with oneself, even though one of Aristotle's most famous thoughts is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. The truth is, it is also the most puzzling aspect of being a human. So how does one come to terms with this? You have to know that even if you don't know what it is, you have a purpose. Aristotle says humanity's purpose is to exercise their goodness to the best of their ability. And if you doubt it, Aristotle even adds these words: humans have a natural desire and capacity to know and understand the truth, to pursue moral excellence, and to do so in their own ideals and in the world through action. So yeah, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. But don't worry if it takes your entire life before you find out who you are. After all, the fun lies in the constant search for wisdom. And that is why the more we know how much left there is to be known. That's how we started this whole thing. So as we build upon Aristotle's thoughts and what it takes to be the best that we can be, he gives us even more advice and the reason why it's so important. He says these words: we are inquiring not in order to know what virtue is, but in order to become good. Our inquiry would have been of no use if we do not examine the nature of actions, namely how we ought to do them, for these determine also the nature of the states of character that are produced. So it's our overall behavior that sways not only us, but those around us and society in general. And that's why Aristotle coined the term, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. He knew that when the individual is at their best, it's truly the only path to a greater society. So, how do we soak in Aristotle's wisdom so that it becomes ingrained in our own actions? It goes back to taking the action first. And yes, taking action is difficult. In fact, to begin something is the most difficult task there is. There's no momentum. It's just a blank page. It's just a big rock. It's a boulder. But once we get that bowl rolling, once we get in motion, we really can keep it up, or at least it's a little easier. But damn it, it is so hard to take that first step. However, what if you knew that that first step, although maybe a very small one, was really a major leap? Aristotle knew this, and he wrote these words: "The beginning seems to be more than half of the whole." I'm Barry Kibrick, and with that in mind, we can rest assured that once we take the smallest step to a better self, we already are more than halfway there. Thank you guys for listening to me. Before I go, I really hope you'll share this podcast with others. And I really want a special thanks to my patrons who make this all possible. If you're enjoying Thoughts Through Time and want to become a patron, please visit my website at barrykibrick.com. On the next time we meet, we're going to leap forward 2,000 years to the 18th century and the period known as the Enlightenment, when we take a deep dive into Adam Smith and see how his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiment, might just be the most important self-help book ever written.